Hi guys, good afternoon everybody. So now we now have our facilitator with us, and before I hand over, I'm going to just say, today's class is. I think we discussed it over the week about how today's class is going to be what further solidify us on brand strategy in the core part. So we have gone through this peripheral, and like everybody has seen my post about him. Tosin is one person that I believe in terms of bringing the idea of what strategy is to all. Just before I go on, can you guys hear me? Just react or something like that. All right, so I'm going to hand over to him. He's a strategy director. He's been at Ogilvy. He's been at all of the top places in Nigeria I work with. In fact, like the plenty case study of his works that I'll probably share later after the class, just to show you guys how much of a privilege it is to have Tosin take us on this course today. And I'm going to hand over. Usually we have 1 hour, and he has the prerogative to handle the class however he deems fit. Uh, I want to say, please, you can now have the stage. Thank you for doing this with us. I will join the class as part of the learners.
Jamal, when did your English become this tush?
Ah,
To be honest, I'm shocked.
ah.
I'm shocked that, but you see, that's what happens when when you start stepping into bigger levels. I mean, now you work on the biggest telco in the country, so that also needs to come with some changes. But
Thank
that's
you,
it.
thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jamal. My name is Tosin, and it's really wonderful seeing everybody. Um, I think we're going to have an interesting time. But if we don't, I mean, sometimes shit happens, right? there'll be there'll be so many more times to have fun times. But yeah, the topic that I'm given to discuss today, it's a topic that is very dear to my heart. For everybody that has worked with me, I don't just work with brands. I believe in the concept of brand, to the point that it's even something that I also use in my personal life as principles and all that. So I'm really excited about this topic. So before I move on, I don't know if we want to do a bit of ice breaking. Maybe two or three people just want to tell us about themselves, maybe tell us their name or something like that. Maybe two or three people in the next 3 to 5 minutes. We just use that to warm up the room and we get this thing off. So who wants to go first? Your name and something interesting about you. Yeah. We just have a couple of minutes to do this. So
Hi, Tosin. Good afternoon.
hello, how are you?
My name is Chukuma Tobena. Uh, uh, so aside strategy, yeah, I'm a gamer.
Mm.
So aside the whole thinking of how we are going to build brand and all of that, I use gaming to relax, right? And I've played in some big gaming competition in Nigeria. So probably if challenge does not pay, I'll just go to my side also and just thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tobina. And gaming is paying these days. I learned that esports is about to become the first Olympic edition of esports is about to be held. Am I correct? So
Yes.
yeah. So in case strategy doesn't work, I think you have a very good plan. Another person.
Good evening, good afternoon.
Good evening.
I'm Joshua,
Okay.
and it's so wonderful to be in this class, also learning from you, sir.
All
Um,
right.
so something apart from strategy, right? I like to sing, although I get the fact that my voice is so whack, and people don't
Oh
want
wow.
to hear me sing. But regardless, I love to sing, so I listen to music a lot and then sing.
Okay. So that means you don't have a side also you can go back to that is viable. So strategy just has
Ah,
to work for you.
it has to work. It has to work.
Okay.
That's
Please, this do we have ladies in this room? The last person should not be a man. I beg. I'm just hearing masculine voice since. Please, is there any any
Hi,
lady?
Tosin.
Hey, finally, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon.
Good
My name is
afternoon.
Alima.
Hi,
Uh,
Alima.
yeah, and I study strategy. I like talking about film, movies, Nollywood, Hollywood. Yeah, things that
That's
you know,
great.
drive my interest. Yeah, so that's that's my side also too.
Okay.
to go to go into I mean I used to do it already.
Mm,
Film reviews. So maybe just go
great.
and focus my life on film reviews if this one is already taking my life.
All
But
right.
yeah.
That's so spot on. That's so spot on. So thank you very much, everyone that have introduced themselves. I think we've been able to warm up the room. For some of you that sort of like followed me on different social media platforms, so if you're part of some WhatsApp group where I engage, I think you already have a, a pretty basic idea of who I am. But for others who probably have not, have not had that privilege, um, my name is Tosin Balogun, right? I call myself here an award-winning strategist and marketing professional. I've been doing this for about a decade. Worked across four advertising powerhouse like Dentsu, Leo Bonnet, Publicis, and I'm currently with the WPP Group, based out of Kenya currently. I'm a speaker and facilitator. I love turning conversations to clarity and strategic action. And I'm also very passionate about sustainability and climate change because we don't have another world. Forget all that thing that Elon Musk is trying to do in Mars. once this world is once this world is out, you don't have another world. So I'm really big on sustainability and climate change. And again, I'm also thinking that maybe after this whole thing with advertising, I might just take that up full time. Okay, so why are we here? It's I was told to sort of like have conversation on what strategists need to know about positioning, differentiation, and brand equity. Although Jamal called it brand 101, I'm calling it brand 1001 because almost everybody on this call, you are strategists and you have had one or two things to do with brands, positioning, launching new brands. I mean, you guys also, you are big boys and girls in your own right. So I think doing the brand 101 is not going to be ideal. So I call it a brand 1001, essentially. So we are just going to be looking at very few things quickly. Um, I hope this is as interactive as possible so that we can really have a wonderful time sharing thoughts and ideas. For me, whenever I handle session like this, I'm also looking forward to learning as much as I'm teaching. So we'll first look at a bit of history. For people who know me, I love like looking at the historical context of things a lot because I believe that we can't navigate our future if we don't understand our past. Something I call it all about the stand, positioning, differentiation, brand equity, and we wrap it up. So how it all started. So this whole thing called branding actually started with the Vikings, right? And it came from a Norse word that means to burn, right? That's the first interpretation of the whole branding thing. It means to burn something, right? Over time, in the 16th century, the name came back, uh, and it means a mark that is made by burning a mold to serve as a symbol on cattle or properties, right? In 19th century, it sort of like came back again as a trademark on product to signify originality and identification. And in the 20th century, it becomes something that corporate organizations do to make an impression of a product in the mind of consumers. And in the 2000s, which is the 21st century, it became a driver and multiplier of business value and valuation. Now, this is my pictorial representation of, of that, right? What you will really realize is that I've also mapped this evolution of brand use cases. I've also mapped it across the industrial revolutions, right? So we have the pre-industrial revolution where humanity was pretty much agrarian, and that was when the definition of burning was very ideal. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay,
Yes, I
thank
can
you.
hear you.
All right, fantastic. Okay, because I just heard a bit of disturbance and I thought probably there's some issues with audibility. So the time that branding definition sort of became like a mark was actually perfectly sit in the first industrial revolution, where we're actually looking at the mechanization of manual labor, right? And the time when it started becoming like a trademark on product to signify originality and identification. That was the second industrial revolution when humanity cracked mass production, and so that was the time we had companies like Ford, mass producing cars. We had breakthrough with electricity. We had breakthrough with what's it called, with automobile engines and all that. Then we get to the 28th century, where we sort of like evolve into the third industrial revolution of computers and digital automation. And that is when, the idea of brand as an impression of a product in the minds of consumers, started taking shape. And we started having, some brilliant thinking from thought leaders, like David Aker, like Martin Neumeyer, like Philip Kotler, and the likes. Another thing I was also thinking I should do also is to map out the thought leadership, but there wasn't time for that. And then we just moved to the fourth industrial revolution that is not so far in the early 2000s, where brand is now seen as a driver and multiplier of business value and valuation. And this is where we get to the age of smart technology and autonomous systems. Now we are in the era of the fifth industrial revolution of artificial intelligence, and still brand still maintains that use case of being a driver and multiplier of business value and valuation. But what you will notice is that this evolution and its use cases has followed the pattern of industrial revolutions. Now, the approach to branding is what I call the art of the stand, and it's actually I actually got it from the quote by Malcolm X that said, if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything, right? And so if you look at the art of the stand, what are we trying to talk about, right? We can map it across, three different waves. The first wave is positioning, and the art of the stand yet ask a very simple question: where do you stand? Differentiation, which is the second wave, ask a very simple question: how do you stand out? And brand equity, which is the final wave, asks a very simple question of how do you stand tall? So you can really see, how stand is just kind of like consistent across these three waves, right? And so we are going to be like going deeper into each of these waves, from positioning to differentiation and brand equity, right? So first, positioning essentially is where do you stand? Where do you stand in the mind of the consumer? Don't forget that when I was talking about the what's it called, the evolution of branding, right? The 28th century was when branding started becoming the impression that organizations make about products in the mind of consumers. Now you see that impression, the wave that actually solidifies it or validates it is positioning. So it actually helps brands to choose and own an advantageous position in the mental space of their target audience. Positioning was actually invented by a very brilliant man called Rise. He's late now. If you have not read his book, you should get it. It's called Positioning: Battlefield of the Mind. uh, but if you have read it, then I know that you understand what I'm talking about. But you see, we also need to backtrack a little bit when we are talking about positioning. And for me, it's really about ancient thinking and also modern thinking. Now, if you look at ancient thinking, Aristotle had a quote, very profound, that says, "The soul doesn't think without a picture," right? The soul doesn't think without a picture. Now, if you sort of like now bring that down to modern thinking by a French social psychologist called Jean Baudrillard, he wrote a book that you should also read. It's called The System of Objects. Now, he has a very fantastic quote that is also like an evolution of what Aristotle was trying to talk about, right? In terms of ancient thinking. And he said, to become an object of consumption, an object must first become a sign. Only then it can be consumed. I'm going to take that again. It says, to become an object of consumption, an object must first become a sign. Only then it can be consumed. Now, if you really look at those two line of thoughts, right, you really see that Aristotle saying the soul doesn't think without a picture, also ties perfectly into what Jim Baudrillard was trying to talk about. Now, you see these two thoughts, they actually validate the reason for positioning. Why? Right? Because for the way the people actually consume things, right, it actually has to be as a sign. It has to be like symbolized, right? And it needs sort of like connect to quite a number of things. Now, those number of things is what I want to explain with why positioning matter. The first reason why positioning matter for brands is that there is a concept called the frame of reference. Frame of reference. For those of you that probably took psychology courses in school, you sort of like have sort of like encountered this. Now, the frame of reference actually talks about the concept of idea, the of self versus the world. Now, this actually speaks to the fact that as humans, the information that will come in contact with in the world, we interpret this stimulus using our experiences as filters. So when we come into the world, right, or we come into a group of people, or we come into some certain kind of settings, right, whatever information and stimulus that is coming from that environment, we actually interpret them based on the filters of our experiences, based on the filters of our exposure. Now, as a brand, let's take a brand, for example, let's take a brand like Peak Milk, for example, right? Now, for Peak Milk to sort of like mean something, or for it to be seen beyond a product that is, that is like dairy, to be seen beyond the dairy product, it needs to sort of like come up with an idea that is not just about what it wants to achieve, but also sits perfectly within the frame of reference of the target audience. Because whatever information the brand is putting out there, it is usually filtered through the exposure and the experiences of people. Now, there is another concept that establishes why positioning matter. It's called the Maya principle. And this principle actually means most advanced yet acceptable. It's actually a very powerful principle that was invented by an inventor called John Louis. I think, yeah, John Louis, right, yeah. And he's actually credited for a lot of innovations in the I think in the I think in the second industrial revolution, right? He designed logos like the logo of the Shell company, the oil and gas company. He designed the Coca-Cola bottle. I think he also designed the London Underground and stuff like that. Now, according to to Louis, he believes that when you want to launch innovation or you are trying to sell anything to people, the idea has to be most advanced, but it also must be acceptable. So there is actually a graph that helps to know that pretty much it's about the fact that if you are introducing new things to people, which is novelty, it also must sit within their realm of familiarity. So if you are bringing things to people that is novel, but people can't relate with that novelty, that innovation is going to fail. And you see, this simple principle is what I've actually used in my career for so many innovation projects that I've been fortunate to be part of. The last reason why positioning matter is also another fantastic concept that is called the associative network memory. Now, the reason why I'm really geeking out on this is because I assume everybody on this call, you are strategists, right? So, and that's why, I'm just sort of like, bringing some of these concepts, where you can sort of like be able to really contextualize, some of these things, right? So, the associative network memory model speaks to the fact that ideas actually are connected, right? No, so ideas don't exist in isolation. So, for example, look at the brand that is used in the image here, which is BMW, right? You can see that BMW actually is not just like a product that exists somewhere. As a brand, it means different things, based on the memory network that is trying to do, or based on the memory network that is trying to occupy. So somebody can see BMW and instantly think of the movie sponsorship with James Bond, right? And from James Bond, they started thinking of athletic, the ladies' man, sophisticated. They can also some can even look at BMW and remember the tagline that says it's the ultimate, is it the ultimate driving machine, right? So they can just, or some can even connect it with the fact that it's a German product, or it's actually the car of my grandfather and stuff like that. Now, this is why positioning matters, right? Because when you position a brand, right, you are actually trying to put the brand in the context where ideas are connected. So it is actually the interconnectedness of the ideas that a brand stands for that makes the position to be strong or makes the positioning to be weak. So also, this is also very useful if you're trying to diagnose a brand problem, right? So if they come and they said, oh, our brand has the wrong perception in the market, or maybe our brand positioning is not strong, or maybe people don't perceive our brand the way we want it to be perceived. a framework I usually advise that you start from is the associative network memory. So you start mapping out the brand to say, okay, what are the things that this brand has represented so far, right? And by the time you successfully build that map, you'll be able to understand where the problem of perception is coming from. Now, the mistake most marketers make is to think that the consumer's mind is like a computer. Now, in operation, it is, but the major difference is that while the computer has to accept anything you put into it, as long as you give it the right command, the mind does the opposite. And you see, that is the reason why, we really need to understand how to figure out positioning, because at the end of the day, the battle for brands is in the mind of the people, right? Just like, the Aristotle quote that talks about the fact that the soul doesn't think without an image. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to curate a certain image through positioning, so that when people think, they can actually associate what we want them to think about with our brands. So how do you figure this out, right? How do you figure this out with the chaos that the human mind is? The first thing I would always recommend is the classic STP that was invented by Philip Kotler. And STP is pretty much segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And I'm very sure quite a number of us have had fun with this framework, so I'm not going to dwell so much on it. But the problem that I usually also see is the fact that quite a number of younger strategists, they want to sort of like use the new models and all that. I usually advise that you go for the classic models. They might not look appealing. It might not be something that the client will say, oh, you are the best strategist they have ever met. But you see, trust me, they get the work done. So based on the classic STP framework, it suggests that you start with a broad market, right? And you sort of like, segment that, right, into groups that offers the best chance of success when you launch your brand. Yeah, and that is where your targeting comes in. And based on that targeted segment, you can now come up with a positioning. And there's a framework here that talks about, you start with the target audience you've identified earlier in your targeting phase. You talk about the brand, the category frame of reference that I've talked about, and the benefit, the reason to believe, and why they should choose you, essentially. Another thing that I also advise is, in terms of figuring out positioning, is to find out who you serve and where do you play, right? So who you serve pretty much is about identifying your tribe. So as a brand, it's really important to identify your tribe. Identify, just like what's it called? Just like it's been said now, the people you vibe with, essentially. So, and what makes that really important is the fact that as humans, right, we are social beings. We want to belong to, to quite a number of things that's kind of like interest us. So a brand identifying the tribe sort of like is a very, very effective and very, very powerful positioning trick. Because once you identify that tribe, you can easily figure out how to kind of like position the brand for them. The second part of this is, where do you play? And I've used the soccer pitch for this. So, for example, football is very, very interesting, and I also know that there are quite a number of football enthusiasts here, right? And you will see that the way the game is designed, players that are on the pitch, they occupy a certain position where they play. Now, that position that they occupy actually validates two things. First is the fact that there is a role that they have to kind of like carry out. So if you are number 9, you know that your role is the striker, right? Um, what's it called? If you are 8 or 10, you know that your role is the midfield, right? So there's usually like a role. Now, but most importantly also is the fact that where the play also contributes to the overarching role or the overarching strategy that the coach has set for the team. So what this means for brands when it comes to positioning is that when you identify where you want to play, right? Number one, it helps you to validate your role as a brand. Just like the way you have either midfielders or strikers or defenders, right? Second thing is that you are also able to connect that positioning to the larger marketing or business strategy that you are trying to achieve. I would like to pause here. No. Let me take this to finish positioning. The final thing on positioning is, how you figure it out is using what I call intangibles to drive one word equity. Now, for so many iconic brands that you will discover that there is just one word that they are actually known for. Apple known for innovation, Disney is known for magic, Google is the search, Microsoft technology, Nike is known for inspiration. What they wrote about Tesla about electrify here, I don't agree with it, but yeah, you get the point. So whatever you're trying to do with your brand positioning, you must be able to drill it down to a one-word equity. So, for example, think of Volvo, that is known for safety. We can also look at a couple of Nigerian brands or brands playing in Africa that also have like one word equity. So maybe if you think of or maybe if you think of like if you think of Milo, for example, right? For me, if I think about Milo, I just think about childhood nostalgia, right? I just think of just so many things in my childhood that Milo reminds me of, right? From the iconic, distinctive sound asset of the clap, the pa 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 pa, that's Milo jingle, to so many sports that they sponsor in schools and all that stuff, right? So at the end of the day, it is important that you are able to distill your positioning to one word equity, right? So that if they say that what is the positioning of this brand in one word, you are not mincing words, you are not stammering. And how can you do that? There's this beautiful framework that is called the 25 Intangibles. It was created by Martin Neumeyer. You might want to also check him out. He wrote a series of books, The Brand Gap, The Brand Flip, and Zag, right? And you see, based on these intangibles, as you can see on the screen, there is authenticity, offer the real thing, availability, belonging, clarity, certainty, all the way to inclusiveness, optimism, all the way down to symbolism. Now, once you have written your positioning statement, you can use this as a framework to ask yourself, what is the one word equity that can explain this positioning statement, or that I can distill this positioning statement into? So that is positioning. Before I go on to differentiation, I would like to pause here and to just sample what you think in the room. Are you gaining any value so far? Is anything that I'm saying, is it making any sense to you? I would just like to get feedback. Do you have some ideas that is coming up in your mind? Or are you even connecting this to some very fantastic things that probably you are working on or your projects? Maybe we have another 3 5 minutes to discuss that before I move on to differentiation. So anybody wants to sort of like talk about something? Okay, please go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. And
Yeah, I think we can't hear you again.
sorry, please. Yeah, I had, and I thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for taking us in this. It's been very, very eye-opening so far, to be honest. And yes, I have been connecting some of the things you've said to some movies that I've watched previously. So the
Mhm.
first slide you put up, the one you related to how brand has been here since the industrial ages.
Yeah,
You putting up that graph kind of made me relate to the Lamborghini Ferrari war. I remember
yeah,
watching a Lamborghini Ferrari movie, and I remember how I think the CEO of Lamborghini went to go and meet the owner of Ferrari to kind of tell him
mhm,
that the era of his cars were over. But effectively, we're looking at two super machines that, to somebody that doesn't really care a lot about cars, it does the job. But
yeah.
the CEOs knew the battle that they were about to enter. The consumer didn't probably know, but the consumer still walked into it. So the Lamborghini Ferrari brand war at the beginning of car industrialization, as it is, like supercar, expensive car industrialization, I found really fascinating that you could find it in brand positioning concepts.
Yep, yep. In fact, if you actually had like, so let's just assume that maybe this course, maybe this is not just like a webinar, it's like a full blown course. There's actually a whole lot of examples from like the first to the second industrial revolution, on the different use cases of brands. From the explosion of automobiles and even to how a lot of entrepreneurs back then, how they try to defend their market share and all that. So thank you for that example. I think that's very fascinating. The last person, we're supposed to spend like 3 minutes on this. Any other person, and please, in the best interest of gender balance, it has to be a lady this time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We said he has to be a lady, and the man is speaking. Okay, go ahead.
That was why I said okay. Let's make the gender balance, and then I think at the end of the class I can just have 1 minute to talk. Thank you so much.
No, no, not a problem. Not a problem. No, you can say what you want to say actually.
All right. Thank you so much, Tosin. And I really appreciate the knowledge so far. But one thing that has caught up my attention is
Yeah,
what is the heart of the stand where you spoke about the positioning, the
yeah.
differentiation, and then the brand equity. Because I currently work at a bank, and we have a whole lot of products. So it has shaped my mindset on how those products can be positioned, can be
Mm,
differentiated from the bank itself, and
mm.
for me to also see it in a different equity that yes, this is a product for the brand, but the product and the brand are divined separately. So it is one thing that I've learned, and I so much appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, it feels good to know that this is making sense to you guys. Because at some point I'm thinking probably
No, no,
this is
no,
not
no,
it
no, no.
the right.
I'm
But
learning so
okay,
much.
okay. Somebody is also saying something. There is a by sorry, I can't pronounce this name, and I don't like pronouncing people's name wrongly. But I'm just going to read the question. Can a brand have multiple one-word associations? No, that's why it's called one word. Now, a brand can mean different things to different people, like I've said with Milo and Indomie. And that is why we have, don't forget the concept I shared about what's it called? The associative network memory model of brand equity. So you can see here that BMW means different things. Some people can see BMW and what they remember is James Bond. Some can see it and they remember the advertising of the ultimate driving machine. Some can see it and remember, the product attributes, remember maybe the dual exhaust and and or the fact that it's a German product and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to positioning and what you are trying to do, it has to be distilled to one word, because once you have more than one word, uh, your team is going to lack clarity. You are going to be chasing different things, and at the end of the day, your effort is going to be diluted. So while I agree that brand can mean different things, and just like you said, Milo, to people, from a positioning standpoint, it has to be a one-word equity. Uh, is that um, is that answered? Okay, I want to assume it is. Okay, Halima, please go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to contribute to that what you just said. I
Okay.
think I think the maybe the reason why there can be a bit of confusion is that I think one word association is supposed to serve more of internally than externally. So there's more of clarity within the business and within the organization. And then for the consumers, then they can now have different interpretations. But all of it will still be centered or surrounded around what the brand is trying to put out.
Thank you for that beautiful contribution, Halima. I actually find that very, very intelligent. So yeah, that's it. So let's move on to differentiation and have more fun, right? So differentiation is the second art of the stand, and it tries to answer a simple question: how do you stand out? So positioning tries to answer the question: where do you stand? And I want to believe that we've seen how to do that. So how do you stand out? Now, the reason why you need differentiation is because we are actually in an age where there is a clutter of everything. I call it the clutter of everything. There is a clutter of products. So for example, I'm a millennial, and I can remember growing up, the only toothpaste that I know, or that is just out there, is Maclean, right? The only detergent that we have was Omo, right? And so it just becomes like easy to navigate the category. Essentially, I think the only TV that I just know around there was President or Toshiba or something, before others started coming in. But you see, you could really get that 30, 50 years ago, there were very few products in categories. But fast forward to now, if you look at the detergent category, there is a lot, right? It's a shit show out there. It's chaotic, right? So the conversation now is that now that we have so many choices, like we have clutter of products, consumers are spoiled for choice. Now, how do brands stand out? And that's where differentiation comes in. And you can also see, for the image on the right that talks about the whole clutter of messages, right? There's a research that says that an average human is exposed to about 5,000 advertising messages every day. That is crazy. Now, it might not be up to that, but even if we put it at 1,000, the conversation is that how does these advertising messages, how do they connect to the audience? Don't forget what we talked about here, that the mistake most marketers make is to think the consumer's mind is like a computer. But in operation, right, or in that's in operation. In reality, even the computer can accept anything you put into it as long as it's a command it can recognize. The mind does the opposite. So the problem that we usually have to try to solve as marketers is that we can create infinite products, we can create infinite messages, we can create infinite lot of things, but the consumer's mind is not infinite. The consumer's mind has finite attention. I'm sure you've also seen data about the attention span online that is less than 5 seconds. Quite a number of you work in advertising, but I'm also sure that when you are on YouTube, uh, you can't wait for the 5 seconds lapse for the ad for you to just press skip. Although I don't recommend that. If you work in advertising, please watch ads. It is really, really important, you know. So, how do we sort of get this show out of the way? Why does differentiation matter? The first is what I call the repertoire buying. Repertoire buying is a concept that was introduced in the book called How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp. You can also check that out. It's a very fascinating book. And repertoire buying explains the fact that in a category, people actually don't sort of like, um, people don't actually have a brand, that they are loyal to. They buy in repertoires, right? And repertoire buying is a concept that also demystified what the marketing world has been hung up with loyalty, with brand loyalty and all that stuff. So people essentially buy in repertoires. There are some certain categories where the effect of repertoire is very, very limited, and in some certain categories is very, very high. So for example, categories like grocery, categories like alcoholic beverage, the level of repertoire is very, very high, right? Now, the second reason why differentiation matters is that differentiation accounts for almost half of a brand's pricing power. Now, this is a data from Cantor Brand Z, and you can see that from the three drivers of pricing power or brand equity, salience, meaningfulness, and difference, different account for 49%. So that means if a brand is not getting differentiation right, then it's actually sacrificing 50% of what is supposed to be its pricing power. Now, there are schools of thoughts about differentiation. I just want to introduce you to this. In case you've also been following these guys, it's going to be like a refresher for you. So, in the past 1 year, some three interesting figures have come up, in the marketing world. There's a guy called Coin Powells. There's a guy called Byron Sharp that wrote the How Brands Grow. And there's Mark Ritson. Mark Ritson is a very brilliant marketing consultant stroke academic. And they have different schools of thought on whether brands should pursue differentiation or distinctiveness. And you need to understand it as strategists, right? For Powell's, it believes that differentiation's role is for long-term loyalty and complement distinctiveness. Baron Sharp downplays differentiation. He doesn't believe in it. According to How Brands Grow, he said brands compete largely on salience and availability. Mark Ritson believes that differentiation is crucial, and he believes it provides foundation for marketing strategy. To distinctiveness, also critical for attracting attention and ensuring salience. Baron believes distinctiveness is what brands should pursue because it is a critical driver of brand growth and recognition, and why Mark Ritson believes that it's important for visibility and second to differentiation. You can also look at other things about the core beliefs for this, for these three schools of thought in terms of the balance for effective brand strategy for Coin Powell's. Baron Sharp advised distinctiveness as a more practical approach for consumer decision making. And while Mark Ritson believes that differentiation drives meaningful brand impact, with distinctiveness as a supporting tool. But all in all, I think the most important thing for us to really understand, right, is the fact that whether you are pursuing distinction or you are pursuing differentiation, at the end of the day, we are trying to make the brand to stand out. That is what we need to have at the back of our mind. Now, and that is why I talk about this behavioral science concept called the von Restorff effect, and it talks about the fact that people will most likely notice things that are like the most different in the set, and that is also the concept that comes about things like the black sheep. So you hear things like somebody is a black sheep in the family, you just instantly know that that person is totally different from everybody in that family, right? This guy Seth Godin also wrote a book that he called The Purple Cow, and essentially it's also talking about the fact that if you're in the bus and you are looking out of the window, right, you will most likely not notice so many things, but if you see a purple cow by the roadside, it's going to get your attention. So how do you figure out differentiation? I have three things that I can recommend for my career and thought I've seen that has worked. First is champion the worthy cause, just like the way Dove championed real women, real beauty. And at some point where people believe that beauty should be curated, should be manicured, and all that, Dove came and reminded women that they are actually beautiful the way they are. You can find and reinforce a deep human truth, just like Nike did with Find Your Greatness, right? And again, for Nike, greatness is not just about the athletes that compete in big, Olympic stadiums, right? Greatness can also be, someone trying to lose 20, someone trying to lose 10 kg, right? The last thing that is the most interesting for me is leverage cultural affinity. Culture is very, very powerful, right? And you see, there is this campaign. I'm very sure most of us, are very familiar with this campaign, the Hero Lager campaign, Eche Fuller, that talks about never forget your identity. You can see how the brand actually used culture to really stand out, by going back in time to use the INCB, the symbols and all that. So before I wrap up with brand equity, what as it I can see a timing is saying that the call ends in 10 minutes, so I just want to be sure that Jamal,
Yes, we
uh
usually have a 1 hour break from based
okay,
on Google this thing. So
based on Google stuff, right? Okay, so let me just quickly wrap up then. So brand equity is answers the question, how do you stand tall? And the reason for this is because brand equity is actually a very important concept when it comes to how you build brands and all that. Now, this interesting data tells us that tangible versus intangible assets accounting for the valuation of a business. It was 17% in 1975, but it has grown to 90% of a business. So intangible assets is actually is responsible for the valuation of a business, right? For the Coke or whatever, there's an experiment that was carried out that the Coke market capitalization without the brand is about $50 billion, with the brand is $120 billion. That is a whooping valuation. And this also explains, how brand valuation has evolved from factories to capital to patent to brands. And this pretty much explains the shifting barriers to competition. So why does brand equity matter? There is this video by by Warren Buffett. I don't think I can play it because of time, but essentially, it is important that brand value is a key component, of market capitalization. As at the last research, it contributes about 20%.
Brands,
You can just
brands are
drop this
moats. A
for us
strong
to really see
brand.
brand as a mode. So brand equity also is a strong driver of shareholder capitalism in terms of stock market. You can see the number as it drives, to 124.9%. And it's also a significant driver of premium pricing, right? So how do you figure it out? First, you need to understand that you need to find a way to balance long term and short term. There's an interesting concept by IPA, actually created by Les Binet and Peter Field, that is called the long and short of it. And what they talked about is the fact that businesses that are in the business of building brands, they need to find a way to sort of like balance long term brand building with short term activation. And they recommended a budget split of 60-40 to deliver maximum effectiveness. Now, what this means is that you don't just do only short-term sales activation, because that is going to hurt your brand growth. But over time, if you want to grow, you need to also pair that with brand building, in terms of how you drive strategic pricing power and creativity that boosts strong affiliation. Another thing that explains brand equity here is the Keller brand equity model. And the logic is very simple. It just so that for you to have a strong brand equity, you need to create the right brand image by constructing the ideal encounters and experiences. You can also see how that moves from brand identity to brand meaning to brand response to resonance. And so finally, we've also been seeing some headlines about how Airbnb talks about how they grew the brand by ditching performance marketing for big, bold brand campaigns. And there's also a company called ASOS, while also talking about the fact that they focus too much on performance marketing because they didn't spend enough on brand. And so let's build great brands at this point. If I can get, if we can still spend the next maybe 2 or 3 minutes to get questions and answers, we can sort of like just take that. Thank you very much. So, questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So I just wanted to ask a very quick question, which is you talked about differentiation and you talked about distinctiveness. Now I know that those are two separate terminologies, but
Yeah.
there's an overlap in them. I want to just be very clear about what the exact difference is, like in practical terms, between differentiation and distinctiveness when we are talking about branding. Because when somebody says that one is more important than the other, or the other is more important than one, it's very confusing, especially with the affinity that both share. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit more on that.
Okay. Thank you very much. So differentiation actually is how you sort of like make a brand to stand out, and so you bake it into the brand, right? You bake it into the essence of the brand in terms of what you are trying to do, how you show up, where you play, and even things with positioning. But you see, distinctiveness is what you build with your brand assets. So, for example, the reason why we can say McDonald's is distinctive because they have certain elements in their brand where people can actually recognize quickly. So, for example, the golden arcs, right? For example, they have even things like the yellow, right? So distinctiveness exists within the brand asset universe. Why differentiation pretty much is the essence, of what you build into the brand for it to stand out. I don't know if that explains it.
Yes,
Thank
that
you
works.
very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any other question? Or we can do it this way since we don't have time. You can sort of like send your questions. Maybe if you guys have a WhatsApp group or send your questions to Jamal, you can pass it across to me and we can just sort of like I can answer them. I can like send the responses, back. Maybe we can take one more. Prince,
Hello, sir.
hey, how are
Yes, sir.
you?
Good evening. I'm
Yeah.
fine, sir. So, yeah, I'm just um collecting comment from what my last fellow student actually said. So, but when it comes to the B2B, like to, because I've been trying to crack the B2B business world, because when it comes to the B2C, it's kind of uneasy. It's kind of easy to break in, but for the B2B aspect, it's very hard. Okay, because now to take for example, a B2B business which is called which core model is actually service based. Let me say, for example, looking at Noah Ark, the way they have kind of differentiated themselves, and that's one distinctive way that you can use to identify them, which is through their comic
Prince,
stuff.
can you
Because
ask the question? We don't have so much time. Just ask the question.
okay, sorry. So my question is, okay, when it comes to the B2B world, like how do we make B2B business actually differentiate themselves without because I don't know, like
Okay,
the
so
B2B aspect.
how do we differentiate
Yeah,
B2B business? Because
yeah.
how they operate is different from B2C, right? It is very, very simple. The concept that I've talked about in terms of the art of the stand, it actually applies. Because at the end of the day, B2B, you are also selling to humans at the end of the day, right? There are humans behind the business. So all the concepts that applies, even though the case studies might have been B2C brands like Nike and the likes, it also applies for B2B. Because at the end of the day, you are selling to humans. So you still need to do your positioning. You still need to find a way to stand out with your offering. And you still need to figure out how to grow that into a very solid brand equity that can command pricing power.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome, Prince. Do we still have some time, Jamal? Or do you want to do the honors of closing this out? Can we still take one more question? Or you want to close this out? While if anybody has any other question.
I think at this point, we'll just have to take questions. If I mean, while there's a group, I've shared the video from the Warren Buffett interview with all the class and on
Yeah.
the group, and even here on the comments. If anybody wants to see, if they have questions, I will share with you via WhatsApp. Thank you for coming. Thank you. I mean, I've been jotting my notes here, also taking lessons. Thank you so much for this session, and thank you guys for interacting. Thank you so much, Mr. Tosin.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. See you some other time. If you have questions, send to Jamal. We can always take the conversation further. Bye bye. Let's build great brands.